Good afternoon. Hi, how is everyone? You're good? Okay, I'm going to ask that question again. And I don't want good, I don't want fine. Because everyone uses those two words. My girl says she's fine sometimes, and sometimes she's not fine. I don't like those words. How are we doing? Blessed? Any other words? Great, I like that. Any other words to capture how you're feeling this afternoon? Excited at the back? How are we feeling? Inspired? Oh, I love this. Optimistic? Wonderful. Any other words? Positive. I like that. Positive, optimistic, inspired. Hello. I'm assuming you're amazing, wonderful people. So good afternoon. Welcome to M&C Saturday School. Our job is the community, the basics of business. It was set up by a group of individuals, i.e. Akil, who's passionate about community development and informing the community about business. And we want to ensure that groups, underrepresented groups, get access to training opportunities and rewarding entrepreneurial careers. I'm a part-time teacher at Saturday School. I don't do this full-time. I'm going to talk a bit more about myself. I have a somewhat unconventional story. So here's the guy I teach you today. I'm Richard Fagbolagun. That's the British pronunciation of my name. I dropped out of university twice. I didn't actually want to go, but being the first son of, I guess, Nigerian parents, like that's your path in life. Is you go to college, you go to university, you come out, all the ladies are going to flock towards you, and then you get married. That was the path that my dad laid out. I didn't want to go, but I didn't have, I guess, any other opportunities in my head. So I went and I dropped out twice. So yeah, became a bit of a rebel once I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I had quite a bit of a strict upbringing anyway. So I was like, when I'm 18, I'm doing what I want to do and not what my parents want to do. But yeah, I ended up setting up a design agency called COMUZI. Akil, you've met, is part of the company. And Alex, we do a lot of research and design for organizations. The best way to, I guess, describe what we do is we solve problems for organizations using research and design. So we're very tech forward thinking and we do a lot of prototyping. And my job is the managing director. So like in a nutshell, my job is to make sure that we make money, we keep money, we save money, and that we don't go bankrupt. So I think I know a bit about cash flow.
I'm going to be talking about the importance of cash.
Giving an introduction to cash flow and cash flow management. I'm going to be talking about a cash flow plan and why it's important to have one. I'm going to talk about costs and I'm going to talk about money coming in. I'm going to give some tips for managing cash flow. And then I'm going to leave the room, not leave the room, but I'm going to leave the space. I'm going to open up the space for questions. If there is anything that I don't mention, please feel free to ask. I don't know everything, but I'm trying my best to answer any questions that anyone might have. So I don't actually know why I did this slide. I did this presentation this morning and I was just in my zone. But why do we need cash? Cash is the lifeblood of business. Cash is probably the most important metric in terms of the day-to-day running of your business. It's not revenue, it's not profit, it is cash. We need cash to survive. Like I said, unless you live on a farm and everything is free and paid for, in the capitalistic society that we live in, we need cash. And we're in London, prices are going up, inflation is going up, so we need cash. What is cash flow? Cash flow is the money coming in and leaving your business. Very simple. It's literally cash flow. It's the flow of money in and out of an account. It's typically calculated as money going in versus money going out. So it's not revenue, which is the money that you've made. It's not profit, which is the money you've made minus the costs. It is literally the money that goes into your business and the money that goes out. Cash flow management is essentially tracking the money that goes in and out of your business and monitoring it against your outgoings, which are your bills, your salaries, and other costs that you might incur while running your business. We don't want to be like this guy. I have been like this guy many times, many times. I started our agency in 2013, and like, I've been this guy. A month ago, I was this guy. I check the bank balance like all the time. We want to be like them. I don't know his name or her name or their name. We'll just call it Poodle, but we want to be like Poodle. We don't want to be like Jerry. Is there a Jerry here? There's no Jerry. Wonderful. All right. So in order for us not to be like Jerry, but to be like Poodle, I have shared this spreadsheet. I'm aware that not everyone has laptops. So if you don't have access to it, I'm going to ask you to basically do it on paper, and then you can update the spreadsheet later on. What was I going to say? I was about to say something. I forgot. My email is richard@COMUZI. So just in case this isn't shared with you after, feel free to pop me an email. Feel free to get my email after, and I'll share the spreadsheet with you. £86 a month. Rather than putting £86 a month, it's better to put 90. Sometimes it's actually even better to put 100 because there's always unanticipated costs. One example is I bank with Metro Bank, and we have quite a few subscriptions with American companies. And every single time a direct debit comes out, we also get paid. We also get charged because it's an international transfer. And again, that's not something that you think about. And it's a fee that can actually add up over time. There's been months where I've paid like £100. Go on, Aki, you were going to say something. Oh, yeah, there's been times where I've paid up to close to like £100, £200 in bank fees in a month because there's been so many international transactions and the bank will charge you for each of those. And that's why a really good idea is to round up the figures and to always overestimate your costs. Go on, Ak. Yeah, just to summarize my point, it's very important to always overestimate your costs. They will always cost more than you've anticipated. I don't think there's one time where I've said, this is gonna cost this amount and it costs less. And this year, with inflation and prices going up, like, I don't see that happening. So always overestimate your costs. And as Akil said, always watch out for VAT. People should communicate when a fee includes or excludes VAT. But just in case, is this working? Testing. Is the mic working? Oh, it is. Oh, thanks. Yeah, just in case they don't communicate, always ask, does it include VAT or does it exclude VAT? Because if it excludes VAT, then you have to pay 20% on top of the fee. So if someone says something costs £1,000 and it excludes VAT, the total fee is actually £1,200. Now, the truth is, or the good thing about that is you can actually get that money back from the government. So VAT is essentially a circular tax. It's not supposed to be kept. But if you're not at a level where you're charging VAT and you're paying VAT, you should be able to get that money back. So if you are running a business and you're not VAT registered, but you're paying things like rent, you're paying things like subscriptions, even day-to-day things, like when you order from Argos, they might not say it includes VAT, but when you get a VAT receipt, you'll see that there's VAT there that you should, like I've said, be getting back from the government. One of the things that we will do again at COMUZI is we will slightly overcharge, and not necessarily even overcharge. If, for example, if I'm doing 15 interviews and I've said I'm going to pay each person £50, right? That's $750, right? But what we've realized is when we've worked with the recruiter, they always charge an extra project management fee on top of the amount that we've paid. So rather than saying, oh, I'm going to pay each person £50, I might say I'm going to pay each person 75, or I might say the total cost for this is this amount. And sometimes when I am working with clients that we have a relationship with, I'll include like a contingency fee. There's times where we've worked on really big projects and I've said, this is a contingency fee and it's £10,000. And that way, if there's an emergency or there's a situation, then your client will understand that you're going to be charging that amount. And like I've said, if you're working with large organizations, they're conscious of this. They know that things overrun. They know that budgets go up. They know that projects hardly ever finish on time. But if you don't communicate that to your client, like, they're going to take advantage of the fact that you haven't communicated because you didn't tell them. And so technically, based on a contract, they don't have to pay what you haven't agreed. But again, if you've got a really good relationship with whoever you're working with, then you can always communicate. I have certain clients where, like, I can literally WhatsApp them and say, hey, this is going to cost this amount more. Can you facilitate it? And they'll say yes or no. And either way, like I said, you will know for next time. But again, it literally goes back to the same thing. Always slightly overestimate how much something is going to cost. If you're, again, doing a service to someone and you said, oh, it's going to take 8 days, like, add an extra day for yourself, because they might be planning. They might send you stuff that you need to read or that you need to go through. And one of the things that I've even realized running an agency is there's a lot of prep work that's done beforehand that you don't get paid for. And so when you are thinking about how much to charge, you want to you essentially want to consider the cost of setting up whatever you're setting up. I used to live in, like I said, I used to live in Cambo. I used to set up. I was in Peckham a lot of the time. And if you walk through Rye Lane, you will typically see aunties asking you, like, if you want your hair done. They'll be like, hey, come and do your hair. And sometimes they'll say, like, sometimes I'll hear like £25, £30 for braids. That's going to take 3, 4, 5 hours. And you think of, like, the amount that they're getting hourly, and you're like, it doesn't make sense. But the truth is, maybe they haven't considered the time that it goes into creating the product or service. And like I've said, that's something that you want to make sure that you consider. And a second thing, again, is to consider new costs that might spring up. So for example, do I need a new laptop? If I'm hiring someone, what does that person need? Typically, if I'm hiring someone, for example, and I say, all right, cool, I'm going to pay this person 30 grand a year. In my head, I know that's actually 35 to 40,000 pounds. And that's because I've got to get a laptop. I've got to think about office space. I've got to think about equipment if they're working from home. And even if they're coming to the office, I've got to think about keyboards and monitors. And even as a business, if you have people on payroll, one of the things that they don't teach you about is employer national insurance. So if you get paid and on your payslip, you'll see employee national insurance and employer national insurance. And the employer national insurance is what the company has to pay to the government. I absolutely hate that tax because I think it's outrageous. But that's because I run a business and I just think all tax is outrageous. But again, when you're hiring someone, that's not something that you consider. And so again, if you are hiring someone, it's good to think about costs, not just from the personal side, what you're paying out to the person, but also the costs that the business is going to incur. You might also want to think about travel. So for example, we're doing a really big project with a really important client and they want in-person interactions. And so maybe 6 months ago, that wouldn't have been the case. But now we've got a team all over the country. I've got people in Manchester. I've got someone in Grimsby, which is like a town that I didn't know of up until that person came to work with us. But now that person has to come down regularly, I've got to think about transport costs. What are the train costs like? I've got to think about Uber. So next week I'm setting up Uber for business because people might need cabs to get to certain places. People might be working late. And so you don't want to have a manual process for that. You want people to be able to do that in an automated way. But like I've said, costs more money. Will I need to pay rent? If you're in an office, for example, we're based at Somerset House and our rent is actually increasing. It was supposed to double this year, but it's increasing incrementally this year. And if we stay at Somerset House, the rent is actually going to double. So again, that's something that I need to consider in my budget. If I'm budgeting for the next 3 to 5 years, I need to consider that rent is going to go up. And chances are, if you are moving into an office space, organizations are going to want to recoup what they lost during COVID. And so look, everyone's out to charge your ass. I'm just going to keep it a buck. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you don't watch your costs in this England, the costs are going to come for you. Again, like I've said, are there any post-COVID costs, such as, again, travel, accommodation, or anything that could be increased based on just the price of petrol. So even if you think about the price of petrol, for example, that's going to have a huge impact on the cost of logistics, and it will mean that things like postage might be more expensive because you've got to get your goods from A to B. It might mean that certain suppliers, if you're dealing with food, are going to be more expensive because there's an extra cost of getting that food to the store. The best advice that I can probably give is to add a certain percentage again onto your prices. One of the things that we do at COMUZI, not to waste time, is to always ask the client what the budget is. Because if you don't ask the client what the budget is, like, you can go and do a proposal, a 20-slide document, and then they say that we don't have the money. So one of the key things I'll ask is, what's the budget? And then based on that, I might determine a day rate. Now, at COMUZI, we have predetermined day rates, and we don't break those rules unless there's a client that we really, really, really want to get. So like, if Nike emailed us tomorrow, then I'm dropping that day rate because I want Nike as a client. But for an existing client, if Nike had the budget, but if Nike came and said, oh, we've got a small budget and I've got cash and I'm not worrying about cash, I will take on that work. But like I've said, what I will say is always overestimate your costs. And as a result of that, always review what you're charging, because chances are you need to charge more. And most people that I work with always undercharge. They always undercharge.
Into your day rate, you figured out your premium.
The only reason why I wouldn't use costs to identify your day rate is because you want to make a profit. So that's one way. One way of doing it is saying, how much do these things cost me a month? This is going to be my day rate, and I might charge on top of it in order to make a profit. But that's not the way that we do day rates. Our day rates normally stay consistent, and what we'll normally do is just look at market rates. What are people in the market charging? Because if you're really, really good at what you do and your costs are low, then that means you're making a clean profit, as opposed to saying, oh, my costs are really low, we're going to charge less as a result. Now, there's an advantage in charging less in the sense that you might get more sales. But if you're in a market where people are willing to pay for a certain amount, then your day rate shouldn't necessarily be based on your bills. There are massive organizations making huge profits, and it's not because of their costs, it's just because they're charging a certain price. So if you think about premium brands like LV is not looking at how much the office costs. Look at that. Those are their prices, and you either pay for those prices or you don't. I'm assuming that everyone's got a few minutes left. I wouldn't fret too much on the fixed and the variable costs. The only reason why I categorize both is if you are in a tight financial situation, you can always look at your variable costs and say, where can I reduce my costs? Because your fixed costs will most likely remain the same. Like I've said, if I'm in a tight spot this month, I've still got to pay staff, but I might be able to reduce my cost in other areas, and those areas are your variable costs, which change over time. So we are based at Somerset House, and our rent is dead cheap. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think we pay about £1,500 a month, and I've basically got unlimited space. Like, if I wanted to bring everyone here into my office, like, I probably could, because it's empty. If you are a freelancer or contractor and you're thinking about office space, the best thing to do is to probably think about options such as WeWork, or to look at places where they can offer you space and it's not a long contract. Because again, we don't know how the next 6 months are going to go, or how the next 12 months are going to go. And one of the oversights that a lot of large companies made during the pandemic was they had like 3-year leases. They had 5-year leases. And so if you're in somewhere like central London, you can almost imagine like how much the rent is. Like, the rent in central London rattles me even today. I don't know if I'm ever going to pay the full price for like a central London building. But what I will say is, again, look at your contracts and try and shorten those contracts as much as possible, so that you're not in a situation where you have to pay for 6 months for space. that you didn't actually need because something happened. You mean if you're running your business from home, then there are a few things that you should be able to expense. I don't know the exact tax rules, but you should be able to get money back for working from home. And any equipment that you buy for work, even if it's coming to your house, make sure that you expense that. Everything that I order, I've got a table. If I get a chair, I expense that. Anything that I do for my employees, whether that's a table, whether that's a chair, whether that's a laptop, whether that's a plug, whether that's a charger, like, you get the point, it's all expense for, because that is money that a business should be incurring. And like I've said, large organizations, when the pandemic hit, most of them said, yo, what work equipment does everyone need? And all of that was expensed. It wasn't paid by anyone individually. So if you do have an accountant, then I would just say have a conversation and see what can be expensed, because chances are you should be able to get money back because you've been working from home. Contractors, I would anticipate how many days they're going to be working. So when I'm working with contractors or freelancers, in the contract, I will explicitly say, we anticipate that you will be there 2 days a week. And so the contractor's aware. And I'm sure that if you communicate that, then hopefully they don't go overboard. But again, when I do work with contractors or freelancers, I might say, number one, keep a spreadsheet. Keep a timesheet. Most of the time I trust who I work with. So I'll tell them to write a timesheet so they know how much time they've done. Because if you're working with someone over the period of a month, that person might forget and give a rounded figure. They might say, I did 9 or 8 point sign days. I'm going to charge 10. And so asking them to do a timesheet will give them more discipline. But again, like I've said, also communicating. And also, if you want to keep the contract tighter, you can just say, I'm going to pay you £2,000, and that's going to be 4 days in a month. And you say the company agrees to pay you 2,000 days in a month. And then in the contract, you could say any changes to the scope will be discussed and approved in writing. And so that way, if the contractor knows that your budget's £2,000 a month and they need to go overboard and there's a genuine reason, they'll come and have a conversation with you. And you can write that down in an extension or contract. And again, that's something that happens in agency land. Sometimes we get extensions because the client realizes that there's further work that needs to be done. And that extension will typically be a whole nother contract. Now I want you to think about revenue / the money that's going to be coming in your business. Whether that's you're already generating money, or you're going to be getting it from somewhere, or you're going to be putting your own money in. And like I've mentioned, when you are done, the cash flow should show you when and if you have enough cash to sustain your business. So when I'm dealing with budgets and when I'm doing budgets at COMUZI, I will start with the costs, and then I'll put the invoices that I'm going to be receiving over the next 6 months or 12 months in. And then based on that budget, it will show me, all right, cool, you might be in the red here. And then based on that, I might change 1 or 2 costs, or I might decide, this project or this thing that we've planned to do, we're not going to do it until we know that we're in the green. Key things that you should think about are, will my invoices be paid on time? So if you send an invoice at the start of July and you know that your client has a habit of paying late, then don't expect that money to come in August. If the money comes in August, then great. Woohoo! Whatever you've planned can start a month early. But if that client has a habit of paying late, then maybe plan that the money is going to come in August. And that way you just save a lot of stress. A lot of business is just about being realistic and not coming in with ideals, because you always get disappointed. If you're selling things online, how quickly will the cash get to my account? So if you're selling on certain platforms, I've sold on Amazon before. I don't know how it is now, but when I used to sell on Amazon back in the day, it would take 7 days, 2 weeks for the cash to actually get in my account, even if I sold something. And when I was a teenager, there were times I didn't have money for shipping. So if I knew, cool, this is going to take 14 days to get to my account, maybe I should go ask someone for money, or maybe I should get money from somewhere else, or maybe the little £50 in cash that I've got, I need to go and put it in my bank account so I can pay to post this thing that I've shipped. If my costs are more than the money coming in, how will I manage this? I want you to think about that as well. I'm going to be giving some tips at the end. And how will I keep on top of my cash flow? So will you need to chase certain invoices? Are there ways that you can have conversations about shortening the time that invoices get paid? If you're using a certain platform that's taking longer to pay you, then do you need to think about using another platform? Those are things that you should think about when you're documenting the money that's going to be coming in over the next few months. So, boy, I'm running late, but I will give everyone 7 minutes. It's 2:46. You have till 2:53. Sorry for the shortened time. I'm running on Nigerian time, but we'll get there. What I will say as well is chasing up invoices will not destroy your relationship. Like I said, I will chase up. I don't care. And I'm blunt. I don't do, I'm just chasing up. I've removed just from all my emails. I'll say, hey, chasing up. Is there an update on this? And like I've said, the person that's paying your invoice, they're going to go home and they're going to eat their pounded yam and they're not going to worry that your invoice didn't get paid. It's you, it's you, the person that's applying the services, that's going to struggle. And like I've said, if you're a freelancer or you're a contractor or whatever, and like you've got rent to pay, that's a huge amount of stress. That person doesn't have that stress. They're going to come to work, they're going to pay your invoice late, and they're still going to get paid at the end of the month. So that's just I guess a reminder to be on top of invoices. And what I will also say regarding this is, if you're working with an organization and they suggest that they're going to pay you in about 45 or 60 days, always try and negotiate. I've worked with clients where they've said 60 days and I've said, like, we're not doing 60 days, and they've gone down to 45. There's some clients that will say, oh, we'll pay you in 14 days. What else was I going to say? But yeah, 60 days, like, I don't do 60-day invoices. I will, so always have a contract. Always have a contract that will basically save your life for the most part. And in the contracts, it should state payment terms. The payment terms are more than 45 days and you know you can't deal with a 45 day delay. Always try and negotiate. Always push. Always have a conversation. You can be honest. Like, if you're a small business, be honest and say, I'm a small business. I need this cash. And 60 days is not going to work for me. Like, most clients I won't work with if they're offering 60 days, even if they're paying me a huge amount of money. And that, even if they like me, then even if it's Nike's going to have to pay me in 30 days. Unless I know that I've got the financial stability to last for that period of time, then again, I'm not going to do 60 days. And that's just because, like I've said, I've got stuff. I genuinely have big bills at the end of the month that need to be paid. If you're an organization or company, you've got investment or you've got security, then you can deal with 60 days and it's no issue. But yeah, one of the things that we do with clients is we'll typically charge upfront at the start. So there are no projects where, like, I've done 10 or 20 or 50 grand of work and then I'm charging you the whole thing at the end. I will typically charge upfront, and then I might charge 25% in the middle, and then I might charge 25% at the end. If it's a really short project, then I might charge half upfront and half at the end, because I know, cool, this is going to be done in a month or two. It's not going to be long. With longer contracts, I will charge quarterly. So if you're doing a 12-month contract, for example, you want to invoice at the start, you want to invoice at month 3, you want to invoice at month 6, and then you want to invoice at month 9. But like I'm saying, a lot of these things are actually negotiable depending on the relationship that you have with the client. So, like, never look at a contract and never settle. Never just look at a contract and settle, because what large organizations will do is their legal teams will go back and forth until they both have a contract that works for them. And sometimes if you're a small business or a freelancer or a contractor, like, you don't do that because you're thinking, there's this massive organization, I really want to work with them, so I'm just going to sign the dotted line. But what you're signing might not be beneficial for you. So yeah, always be conscious of that. If I know I'm going to need money for a specific purpose, I always have another account for it. So I have my business current account, I have my savings account, and we have a tax account. So, because we charge VAT. So if I send an invoice for, like I've said, 10 grand or 20 grand, and it includes £4,000 in VAT, when that invoice gets paid, I move £4,000 to the tax account. Yes, exactly. And so that means that when I'm doing my cash flow, I'm not doing it based on money that I think I have. Because if I say, oh, I've got this amount in the current account and the VAT bill comes through, I'm going to have an issue because I didn't anticipate the amount. Now, what I will say, I'll just go to tips. But what I will say about VAT is, if you're also paying out VAT, then chances are your VAT bill is going to be lower. And so if you just move all the VAT that you have in general and you're spending on VAT, chances are you're going to pay less VAT and you're going to have a bit of cash aside. And that's happened to me. There's times we've been a good couple thousands of pounds under the bill because of the VAT that we've paid out. But if you're just saving that money, it means it's there. Worst case scenario. So when it comes to receiving VAT, if you are not making above £85,000, you're not legally required to register. But if you're paying for things that have a VAT cost, then I would say register for VAT. Because either way, it just means that you're ready when you start charging VAT, as opposed to, oh, I'm making 85,000 now, let me go and register for VAT. Because chances are you've probably also lost out on the money that you spent over time. So like I've said, even with things like Argos, when I order something from Argos, I'll message them and say, can you send me the VAT receipt for this thing? Because chances are there's money that can be saved. If I've bought a laptop for like £500, that's £100 in VAT. And if you're not registered, you're not making £85,000, that's £100 that you could get back. So take advantage of VAT. I wish individual people could like get back VAT, but unfortunately you can't. But that's why, again, I've said, if you're working from home, for example, make sure that you expense everything, because that's VAT that you'll be getting back. But if you bought that as an individual, you bought a laptop as an individual, like you're not going to get the Mac back. I think legally you can go back maybe about 6 months. You can go back about 6 months. And what I would do if I incurred an expense for something personally that should have been a business expense is I will send the money back to myself. So if, for example, I've spent £500 on this phone, right? And I use my personal account, I will send the money from the business account to my personal account, which means there's a transaction. And when they ask for the receipt for the transaction, then I'm going to show the receipt that I used to pay for the phone, which includes VAT. So technically you can still get your VAT back, even if you've purchased something through a personal account. Tips for improving cash flow, we've covered. Negotiating favorable terms with your clients. And like I've said, being annoying when you have to. There was recently a late invoice that we had at COMUZI, and the kill messaged everyone. We're talking about an organization that has hundreds of millions of pounds, and the kill messaged the CEO, and the invoice was paid that Friday. But the point being, be a pest, because they're going to go home and they're not going to worry about you struggling because your invoice wasn't paid. So make sure you're a prick, because those organizations will do the exact same. They don't play with their money. If you owe the bank money, they're not playing with you. Exactly. And if you owe HMRC money, HMRC are like, they're the police to me. They will come for you. They don't play around. So in the same way, don't play around with your cash, because that could be the difference between your business surviving or like your business collapsing. Using accounting software for invoices and bills. So I know that Square's been mentioned. I use an accounting package called Xero, and I use it for invoices, and it shows me when every invoice is due. So if I log in tomorrow and the invoice is overdue, then I know, all right, cool. On Monday, I need to chase up for that invoice. It also allows me to forward bills. So if a contractor sent me an invoice with a due date, once I forward it, it will say, here's this bill, and it needs to be paid by this date. And that's a good way to keep track of the money coming in and the money that you need to pay out as bills. Thirdly, switching to yearly contracts or leasing, as that might be cheaper. So when it comes to all the laptops that we supply for our employees, they're not bought, because see me, I'm not paying £2,000 up front for a Mac. So I'd rather lease it. I'm going to be honest, I'd rather lease it and pay it after 3 years, even if I have the money for the Macs. I'll lease it because the cost is over time, and like I don't even look at the direct debits. Whereas if it was a huge cost that I paid up front, I'll be looking at that £2,000 like, oh my gosh, that money's left the account. And you can imagine how expensive that can get if you have a large team, if you've got 10 people, if you've got 20 people. Also, like I've said, switch into yearly contracts. So with certain subscriptions, they will normally give you an offer if you switch to a yearly contract. So if you've got a lot of cash up front, then it might be good to switch to a yearly contract because you're going to get a discount as opposed to paying monthly. So I think I paid for Zoom for a year in advance and they gave me like 40% off, whereas I wouldn't have got that discount if I was paying month by month. This is very important. Create a real-time cash flow document. So I know that we've created a cash flow plan, but it's important to create a cash flow document where you're updating your costs and the money that comes in by the week. Right. So use the leverage of leasing as opposed to upfront. Sorry to interrupt. Right. Seeking financial support in advance. So, oh shit. Create a real-time cash flow document. I forgot that one. That's a key one. So I know we've talked about a cash flow plan, but it's really important to have a cash flow document. I have a cash flow document that I update basically every week, and I record all of our transactions on a weekly basis. And so by the time I've been done with that cash flow document and I update it, it will normally have the same balance as what I've got in the bank. And so if a queue comes to me, for example, it says, oh, can we spend £100 on this? I know we're going to have the cash because I've looked at my cash flow plan and I've updated the cash flow and I know, all right, cool. We've underspent for the month, for example, and we have a bit of cash that we can spend. Also, like I've said, seeking financial support in advance. Banks will typically offer different options in terms of financial support. We're actually moving banks now because the bank that we're with now, I don't feel is offering us enough financial support for the money that we're making. One really good service that banks will tend to offer you, depending on your business structure, is invoice financing. And so if you know an invoice is going to be late, or you know a client has a tendency to pay late, then it might be a good thing to go to your bank and say, hey, I've got this invoice. Can you give me some of it up front? And what they'll do is they'll essentially buy the debt that the organization owes off you. So they might say, cool, we're going to give you 90%, or they might say, we're going to give you 95% up front. And then when the cash comes in, we're obviously going to essentially take all of the money. But the advantage is you have the cash when you need it, as opposed to when the organization pays. And so if you've been calling up an organization and it's like, it's a month late and they're not showing any signs of paying, it might just be good to get the invoice financing, because like I've said, the consequence of not having that money is more than what you're going to do with the money when it comes in, or the late fee that you might have charged on top of the invoice. Many banks will also offer loans and overdrafts, again, depending on your financial performance. So yeah, when you do set up a business, big advice, like set up a business bank account, because your financial history will help you when you go to the bank for extra support. Looking for offers. Like I've said, when I sign up for subscriptions online, like I always check for discounts. Like if I'm renewing like my Zoom account for a year, there's like 10 people on that account. I'll just go online and like search Zoom discount codes. Like I do not let my ego get the best of me when it comes to saving money. And I've done that before. Like I order bare stuff off ASOS and my sister would always be like, come to me, I got a student code. And I wouldn't go. And now I've realized all of that time, I could have just been more patient, could have called my sister, and I could have saved 10% each time. So again, always save as much as you can, because the outside world has no mercy on your business. It's your responsibility to protect your business. And lastly, cutting down on costs when you need to survive. So if you are in a tight spot, again, always look to cut costs where you can. If I was in a mega tight spot right now, like I'll speak to Somerset House and I'll say, yo, you can't pay rent next month, or we might not be able to pay rent for the next 3 months. Is there something that we can do? Can you pause that rent, or can I pause my contract? If there's other costs that you incur on a monthly basis, then you might need to cut down. So for example, if you are running a business and you have loads of staff, one of the costs that people don't typically look over because they might be low is like subscriptions. So like I've said, your Zoom, your Google, your web hosting. The bigger your team is, like the bigger those costs are. So Zoom, for example, cost me about £1,500 a year. Doesn't sound a lot, but like it's a lot of money. And if you're using 10 other tools, then that's 10 grand. That's 15 grand because you're using Google, because you've got something with Microsoft, because you've got Zoom, because you've got a phone lease, because you've got a subscription, because you're using Adobe or you're using Figma because you need to design. All of these costs add up. And so it might be good over time, every 3 months, every 6 months, to look at the bills that you have and say, like, do I really need this thing? Do I need 10 accounts if like 2 people have left? Or do I need this many licenses for this software if the team aren't using it? But yeah, those are my tips for improving cash flow. All right, cool. Thank you so much for attending today. I would appreciate if you could fill in the feedback form. That's the link. It's also accessible via a QR code. But yeah, like I've said, if you need any help or advice, or you need this, feel free to email me, richard@comuzi.xyz. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed today. Thank you.